I've always wanted to make a rock and roll album cover. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and album covers had these cool epic fantasy or sci-fi kind of vibe to them, and I just thought that one day a rock and roll band would call me up and ask me to do a cover. Well, I'm now 56 years old, and that opportunity has still not presented itself to me. So I thought I'd just make one for myself. And the idea came to me from a photo reference I purchased a few months ago. I get all of my ideas from something visual. I see an image and it sparks a concept which becomes a painting. And that's not how it works for everyone, of course. Some people get an image in their mind and then they flesh it out on paper. Others are inspired by a song or a poem or a book. All of these are valid. Any way you get your inspiration is the right way for you. For me though, I need a muse, a jumping off point, which is why I like to buy stock photo references from other artists, creative people who dress up in costumes and pose for visual artists like myself. It's a wonderful way to support other artists, and I love having a muse to inspire my art. This album cover art was inspired by a stock image from Red's References. I met them online and I fell in love with their aesthetic. Their poses are so classical and their figure is quite honestly epic. They can be both masculine and feminine at the same time, and I found that really appealing for my art. But it was this image, this one right here, that made me pause and say, I've got to paint this. And so I did. I didn't really think of anything other than I just wanted to try and capture the emotions of the reference somehow. So I broke out the gouache and painted. I had no thought or theme or really any intention of making art. I just wanted to capture the anguish, the fear, the drama of the reference. And so with no planning, no intention, I painted and nothing hit me until here. I thought it'd be fun to make the paint run off the paper. I was bored and the painting was going nowhere, and then it hit me. What if her hair came to life? What if she was horrified by her hair? What if she was Medusa? In the very first moment of her curse, her hair transformed into snakes, her face showing anguish and absolute horror. So I started over with an actual plan, an idea for an album cover for a band that is, at the moment, to be determined. I had Medusa's face, I had the wonderful reference for that, but now I needed to know how to draw snakes, I guess. I decided on rattlesnakes and found a bunch of images that would help me get the shape and textures of her hair right. And I think it's important to say here that I have no idea how to draw snakes. I've maybe attempted this once or twice in my entire life. I did paint Medusa live during my Hair Journal sketchbook series, but I'm not someone who knows how to draw snakes confidently. And you can see that in how I'm doing these scales. They're, for a lack of a better word, wonky. They're not clean, they're not professional looking, they're definitely not confident. But here's the thing, I'm not gonna let it stop me. I'm not gonna not make art because it's not good or it's not as good as I want it to be. I can't expect that I'm gonna be instantly good at drawing snakes. That's just completely impractical. Do I want this to look good? Absolutely. Am I annoyed that I don't know how to do snake scales well? You betcha. But I'm making this album cover. Wonky scales and all, I'm doing it. The more I did the scales though, the more I saw a kind of pattern to them. There's kind of like a diamond-shaped pattern that the scales seem to follow, and I did my best to give myself a guide for that. Also, apparently, the underneath of snakes have long, thin scales, which I didn't realize until I had already inked scales on the underside of several of the snakes. My first major mistake. Undaunted, though, I broke out the acrylic gouache and proceeded to cover up my epic blunder as best as I could. And I think it's important to mention that it's only because I've made thousands of mistakes in my lifetime that I was able to remain calm and soldier on with this piece despite the severity of my goof up. Because I've been here before, I knew how to fix it, and that confidence, knowing I have ways of recovering from my own stupidity or artistic deficiencies, lets me be more bold with my art, lets me experiment and take more chances when I'm feeling like I want to do something new, like drawing snakes. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. You need to make mistakes, lots of them, so you can figure out how to fix them. You've got to create the problems so you can find the solutions, I guess. And for those of you who work digitally and have an undo button, just know that the rest of us all hate you. No, we don't hate you, but we just wish our undo button wasn't a bottle of acrylic gouache and a hope and a prayer. You may have noticed that I'm not really rushing through this video. It's not a 1-minute vertical short with 2-second clips and me talking really fast. Why, you may ask? Because Medusa, just the pencils and the inks, took me 8 hours to do. I did it over a period of about a week, and I just kind of spent maybe 20 or 30 minutes at a time noodling scales and listening to music, and I wanted you to see what it looks like to just chip away at something. Something that on the outset looks rather daunting, all those scales, all of those snakes. 8 hours of inking sounds like a lot, doesn't it? And it is, and I wanted you to see that in this video. But I also wanted you to know that it can be fun and even a bit relaxing to have a larger piece on your desk that you can just work at when you're feeling artsy. No planning, no wondering what am I going to paint today. That's already worked out for you. Everything's there. You just need to put the time into it. Get into the details. Listen to some music or an audiobook and just make art. It's a nice feeling, and I miss doing this more. Making content is much different than making art. Content is something we do to get views and entertain people. It's, in my opinion, kind of shallow, superficial. I don't think any artist I've ever met wanted to be a content creator. We just want to make art. My son likes to tease me by calling me a content creator or a YouTuber or a TikToker, and he knows that really chaps my hide. I'm an artist. That's just who I am. But I've also learned to become a content creator too. I've learned how to tell stories online that help me get my art out there to a larger audience. I've gotten good at making videos, shorts mostly, to entertain and hopefully to educate, but my heart is still an artist's heart. I want to create art, not content. I want my work to speak for itself, to move people. But this is kind of where we as artists are right now. This is our only outlet. The only way we can reach audiences, through social media, making content instead of art. I've been fortunate though. When I've gotten tired of making content and I've just wanted to do something larger for me, for my artist soul, you all have supported that. A year ago, I was so burned out from making little 1-hour paintings each day of Taylor Swift or Billie Eilish or Severus Snape or Ice Cube or whoever was of interest to both my followers and the algorithm at the time. I was tired of creating content for the sake of views, and I just said enough. I'm done. I'm gonna just paint a gothic vampire with a bunch of old books behind her, and it's gonna take me a couple of weeks, and I'm just gonna make art for me. Turns out that was the most popular piece of art I've ever made, all because I ignored the calls for content and listened to my heart and made something that made me happy. This is her right here. This is the Gothic Vampire. I did this just for me. And that's pretty cool, I think. So back to Medusa and her snake hair with the wonky snakes and uneven scales, and it's nothing amazing, nothing of any great importance, but it makes me happy. Just making art for the sake of making art. Well, and also the hope that it'll become a rock and roll album cover. But for now, let's just be satisfied with the joy of making the art, and we'll see where the rest goes. And I've messed up this head pretty badly, so we're acrylic washing again. Now, the reason why I'm using acrylic wash is because, unlike regular gouache and watercolors, it's waterproof. Regular gouache and watercolors are reactivated when in contact with water. They become liquid again. Acrylic wash, like acrylic paints, are waterproof, so I can cover up my mistakes, and when I go over it with watercolors, it won't reactivate and become liquid. Now, it's not really a good surface to paint on for watercolors, and the texture is different than the paper, so it'll be obvious where the mistakes are when I paint over them, which is why I'm trying watercolor grounds. When I made some mistakes, as I'm prone to do, on one of my other projects, it might have been the Guild or the Dragon and Centaur, someone left me a comment to try watercolor grounds in hopes that the texture would feel more like the watercolor paper when I cover up my mistakes. So I went to Plaza Art in Nashville, picked up a couple brands, and today we're trying this Daniel Smith watercolor ground. And before you think that this is the very first time I've tried it, I did some tests on a scrap piece of paper, and it was okay. Not great, but it was better than painting just over acrylic wash. So I'm just hoping for that with the watercolor grounds. Would you believe it? I messed up again. This snakehead is giving me so much trouble. This, my friend, is art. This is what it's like to make art as a human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to get things wrong. We're going to change our minds. Art is imperfect. Art is human. Embrace it. Be okay with the imperfections, with the wonkiness. For the most part. Unless you just can't get the snakehead right, then acrylic wash the heck out of it. I know. Do we accept the imperfections or fix them? The answer is a resounding yes, mostly, when you feel like it. We're human, we're artists, we are emotional beings. We want our work to capture something magical, and we can almost never achieve this in our art. Yet we continue to try. It's silly, I know, but when things do work out, when it clicks, it is magical, isn't it? I don't know if this Medusa painting will be anything magical. I guess we never do until it's revealed to the world. But I did have fun, and that's something, I guess. And now, after 8 hours of noodling and making mistakes and fixing the mistakes, and a whole lot more noodling and mistakes, we're done with the inking. We're essentially halfway through this painting. And the painting is a whole other animal, isn't it? There's color theory and light and shadow and skin tones and layering of colors, and so many things can go wrong, but also, if I get lucky and the painting comes out well, it could elevate this into something magical. If I'm good at the painting part, maybe all the things I didn't like about the inking will be covered up. Who knows? Or the painting could absolutely ruin the inking. That's always a possibility. For now, I'm going to scan Medusa in so all of you can color her in with me. And I know a lot of you ask me how I scan my art in, so this is my scanner. It's maybe 5 years old or more, I think, and it's an Epson scanner, and if you notice, the scanning area is only 9 by 12 inches, so the whole album cover can't fit on the flatbed area to scan. So what I do is scan it in parts. This one only took 4 scans to get all of it in, but something much larger like the Guild or the Dragon and Centaur paintings took as many as 15 scans to capture. Once I have all of the pieces, Photoshop has a function called Photo Merge that puts all the pieces together for you automatically. All you need to do is find the pieces and it figures it out like it's solving a puzzle, and it does a really good job, and I'm pretty happy with it. So that's how I scan my art in, and this is the final merged piece. Pretty neat, huh? After 8 hours of penciling and inking and a little bit of acrylic wash and some watercolor grounds and a tape peel and scanning in 4 parts and Photoshop merging all the parts together, we have the line art for an album cover for a band that doesn't know at this moment that this is for them. Or maybe this will just sit in a drawer in the Hobbit hole, a testament to a dream that has yet to be realized. Who knows? But now comes the color, and if you want to color Medusa in with me, I'm adding a link in the description where you can download the high-resolution scan for free. Okay, we have the inks done and Medusa is all scanned in, and now it's time to start coloring her in. Normally I just grab some watercolors and start painting. I go with my gut instincts for color, and sometimes it comes out well and sometimes not so much. But when I've put this much time and thought and effort into the pencils and inks, I don't want to risk not liking my color choices. So I make color comps. I work out possible choices for colors in an expendable medium. For the Dragon and Centaur painting, I did this digitally. I took my scanned in inks and mocked up possible color schemes for the final painting. But for Medusa, I wanted to do the color comps traditionally. So I printed out a few pages with small 4x4 inch images that I can cut up and then color in, like my very own coloring page. And I highly recommend you try doing this if you've never done this before. Getting to play around a bit with your color palette before you start a large piece lets you be way more bold with your colors. You can experiment here at this stage, and who knows, maybe you might do something you'd never thought of before. There's really no risk to doing these. If you ruin it, you're only out a few minutes of your time. I was originally going to go with red and yellow for the snakes, but by doing these color comps, I can also see how purple or green or blue work. You can see I really wanted the red and yellow to work, but I think in the end, the purple and teal snakes look the best. So that's the one I'm going to go with. So now we're going to tape the painting down to my artboard. The reason why we tape our paper down is because the water we add to the watercolor paints will make the paper buckle and bend. By taping it down, the paper is forced to go back to the original flat shape when the paper dries. The reason why I tape it to the board, which is just an artboard you can get at any store, is because it allows me to move the painting if I need to work on something else without having to tear up the tape if it was taped directly to my table. It's a convenience thing. I want the colors of the snakes to be really vibrant, so I'm going to try some Doc Martens concentrated watercolors. They're very, very saturated, and I like using them for things like this. I just don't know how saturated they're going to be until I try it. So I'm going to try a couple little swatches on the right and see how much water I need to add to get the right amount of saturation from it. Okay, I think I know what I need to do. I hope. Here we go. First little bit of color. And it's a little light. I might have put a little too much water in it. Let's do another layer. It's always safer to go light to dark. You can always make it darker, but you can't make watercolor lighter. That's looking a little better. I wonder if I should add a little bit of blue to the purple, if that would give it a little more depth to it. Kind of, this is the part where it's maybe in a little bit more shadow. Yep, I ruined it. That was too dark. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Time to break out the colored pencils and try to fix it. I haven't even done one snake, one little part, and I've already ruined this. Well, I'm in it now, so this is how the snakes are going to look. So apparently they're going to be a bit darker than I had hoped. This is what happens with art. You just never know. I could keep doing the same thing. I could keep drawing the same faces, painting the same faces over and over and over again, and I'll have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen, but I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. So I try new things like Medusa, like snakes. I have no experience with this, but I'm going to try it. I'm trying purple and teal snakes, and it could go well or it could not. And unfortunately for me, it did not go well. And I always know that it didn't go well when I break out the colored pencils and the gouache to go over my watercolors. That's when you know I'm panicking. I'm in rescue mode. I'm doing everything I can to try to save this. This is the exact same thing that happened on the Dragon and Centaur. I went too dark and had to go in with gouache. So what you're seeing now is the culmination of probably 10 days of me trying to save these snakes. 10 days of me just trying to figure it out, trying to find some sort of solution that I'm happy with. Each morning I'd come down into the Hobbit hole hoping that I would have a solution, that somehow I have a breakthrough that's going to fix everything. I try new techniques. I try new mediums. I redraw, I repaint, and I paint over and over, hoping that I can find the magic sequence that's going to fix these snakes. I don't want to lose all of the work that I put into this. I've spent so much time getting just the pencils and the inks done, and now I'm 10 days into painting it and nothing is working, and I don't want to lose that. So I paint over it and I start again and again and again, and none of them are good. To me, none of them are right. I just can't seem to find the right look that I want, and even if I did, every snake here is completely different than the previous one. They're all of the scales are just completely different because I'm experimenting on each one. So after 10 days, I finally just decide to give up on the snakes for a bit and work on Medusa's face. It's skin tones, it's portraiture, it's something I know and something I'm comfortable with and something I feel confident in doing. And immediately my confidence comes back. I feel, okay, I can do this. I know how to, I haven't lost all of my artistic abilities. And that's because I'm doing something I'm familiar with, something I'm very practiced at. Snakes, not so much. Think about it. I've done thousands and thousands of pieces of art. I'm 56 years old, and there are still a lot of things that I've never drawn or don't draw enough to feel confident at. I want you to remember this moment the next time you're looking at something that you tried and failed at. It's natural. It's normal. We're not going to be really good at stuff the very first time we do it, or even the 10th or 20th time we do it. This stuff takes practice. Okay, so I'm at the point now where I'm happy with her face. It's very stylized. It's in this very graphic style that I like to paint in with my watercolors. And the snakes in no way match that style. Also, this snake here, the one that's closest to her eye, I didn't like the way that it was kind of curved. I just think it was very inelegant. And so I'm at the point to where I'm kind of done with this already. So I'm going to try to fix that to give it more of a kind of a cool flow. And if I'm changing that snake, I have to fix all of the ones around it to make sure that it's consistent, which means I got to paint over all of these other scales that I've already done a dozen times already. And time to redo all of the scales, which means I am redoing my guides, which is showing me where the scales are going to be and how they wrap around the form of the snake. And then we add the gouache scales, which I don't know why I keep trying this, because so far it has not worked well for me and I don't like it. But I keep trying it because I keep trying to save this painting to no avail. And now I'm back to the colored pencils and hope that nothing is working. Nothing I do is working. And I feel absolutely gutted by this. I'm going to try one more thing. I'm going to trace the outline of the snake, and I'm going to try to transfer this over to a piece of watercolor paper, just in the hopes that maybe I could do it in watercolor in the style that I did the face. If I start from scratch on a single snake and I make it look good, I would, I guess, redo the entire bunch of snakes on separate pieces of paper and then glue them on. I kind of don't know if I want this to work, because that would be a whole lot of work that I've already put in so many hours onto this piece, but I've got to try. And if you're wondering, this is just a piece of clear film. You can get them at your local art store. It's Grafix, Grafix, clear lay film. And it comes in I think this was 9x12 sheets. So my thought is I can take this tracing here and I could do a tracing then onto the watercolor paper, which watercolor paper is pretty thick. So I'm going to need to get some sort of light source underneath it, like a light box. And I don't currently have a light box, so what I'm doing is I'm just taking an image of white and I'm blowing it up on a tablet. And I'm just using the tablet with a white screen to be my light box, and it's at full brightness. And as you can see, it works pretty good. So just a quick tracing of my drawing so I can get the proportions exactly perfect to the painting. And then another 20 minutes or so of inking another snake and the scales. A lot of scales. Like if I never see another scale again, it'll still be too soon. And after a little bit, I decided I'm not going to go and re-ink this entire thing and then hate it. So I started painting what I had already inked. Just this little part, just to see if I could do the style of coloring that I want to do. Can I do it? This is just a test. Can it be done? And within a few minutes, I realized I don't think this is going to work. I don't think it is. I don't think it's the right look. I don't know. You tell me. If I was to take this snake, say I had finished it, and I put it here, I mean, I think it matches up with the style pretty well, but to me, it just still doesn't feel like it's, I don't know. It's just not, it's not clicking. So I try again. I go over it again with acrylic wash. I go again over it with the lines and the gouache and the colored pencils. And I think at this point, I just realized that I'm done. I'm not going to be able to fix this. So for me, this painting is a failure. It's done. But before I throw it in the corner of shame, I'm going to try scanning it in and just see if it's possible to fix it in Photoshop. Okay, she's all scanned in, and now I'm going to try to find the inks. Here they are, and see if I can lay the inks over the painted, or at least what I've got painted so far, and see if I can kind of clean up all of the lost line art that I've done. And I know this is looking like it took me all of 5 seconds, but this actually took me a while because for some reason the two scans didn't line up perfectly. So I kind of had to really nudge it kind of sector by sector, almost snake by snake, but I eventually got it all lined up. And now I'm just going to isolate the two colors of the snakes, which is the underbelly teal and the purple. So I'm going to have those on 2 separate layers so I can color them in as easily as possible. And once I've done that, I picked 6 different colors. Seven different colors. I picked 7 different colors for the snakes. And I started to layer colors in the way that I kind of do the watercolors. I found a watercolor. This is totally, I don't do digital stuff. So this is just whatever is a generic watercolor Photoshop brush. That's what I'm using. And I'm using a cheap little Wacom, those little bamboo ones that I have, and I'm experimenting here. Like I said, I'm in desperation mode. To me, this piece is something that I'm ready to throw away, so I can't ruin it anymore, which is why I'm doing this. I wasn't able to paint the snakes in the same way that I was able to paint the face, with that very graphical, harsh line kind of where you could see the colors separated line after line after line. I like that. It's kind of a style that I've developed. And I wasn't able to do that with the snakes because I kept trying to fix it with gouache and colored pencils, and I lost that. So this is just a chance for me to at least have maybe a moral victory and see if I can replicate that style with the snakes somehow. So you can see I'm just finding the lights and the shadows. I'm finding where the highlights are, and I'm using those 7 colors as my 7 layers. Then once I'm happy, I could start adding a little bit of individual scale shading. And I would say this probably took me another 4 days of just learning the different techniques and kind of finding what I can and can't do with this. But I actually started to enjoy it. It was really actually kind of fun, and I felt a little guilty for enjoying it. There's a big part of me that wants this painting as an original painting. I want to be able to frame it. I want to be able to look at it in reality, not digitally. And doing this digitally, I guess I feel, and this is no knock on digital artists. This is just, I started it as a traditional painting, and I kind of feel like I failed by not being able to finish this traditionally. But if I'm being very honest, I actually enjoyed doing these scales digitally. It has a nice graphical kind of look, and it was a lot of fun to do. I tried doing exactly what you're seeing here with the gouache, and it just wasn't as clean. It wasn't as nice as this. So I did this for 4 days, I think. It wasn't 4 days straight, but I would come down. This was during Christmas, and I would come down to the Hobbit hole, and I would just sit and work on this. And I found it really relaxing. There was no pressure on it because I was already planning on throwing the painting away. I'd scanned it in. The original painting is stuck in a drawer somewhere, and this was really more play than it was anything else, and I found it really relaxing and really fun. And at this point, I don't know what there is to gain from this. I don't know if there's a lesson to be learned from this, but right now, I guess this is what someone does when they don't want to let go of a piece of art. And they've tried every traditional option, so I'm trying a digital option. So I think the hardest part is the blending between the digital to the traditional, which is where the snake meets Medusa's head. And I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that there's still not enough texture to it to match the watercolor texture, the watercolor paper texture that is on the traditional side of this. So I've tried a few different stuff with layering a watercolor texture over this, and I think it's helped a little bit, but I'm trying to keep it from feeling too digital right now. But I think I may be done with it. And I'm not sure if I am done as in I'm happy with it, or I'm done as in I don't want to work on it anymore. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the final, if we're going to call it final, we'll call it the final piece. And I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Is this art? Is this half art and half digital fixing it? This is no way of saying that digital art isn't art, because it 100% is art. It's saying that I didn't start off with the intention of making digital art. I started off with the intention of making traditional art and wound up putting as I'm looking at it, a digital band-aid. Please let me know in the comments. As for the original, I'm not going to put it in the corner of shame just yet. I think I'm going to put it in my drawer and let it sit. Maybe one day an idea will come to me, a new technique, and I'll be able to fix it traditionally. Or maybe in time, I'll come to love the Frankensteined half digital, half traditional version of it. At the end of the day, though, I made art, and that's the most important thing. I may not be as happy with it as I would have hoped. I may not be showing this to a band in hopes of making this an album cover, but I made art. And as always, I'll show you the failures as well as the successes, because that's life. That's being an artist. That's being a human. And I hope it encourages you to experiment, to explore, to grow as an artist and as a human. We're going to make mistakes. We're not going to like everything we do. But in the end, what matters is we made art.